Welcome to the About the Face podcast, sponsored by the American Academy of Facial Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery through the Facial Plastic Surgery and Aesthetic Medicine Journal. My name is Dr. Peter Vila, and I'm a facial plastic surgeon in Portland, Oregon, specializing in facial rejuvenation and rhinoplasty. And it is my distinct pleasure today to speak to the authors of the manuscript entitled Limited Delamination Modifications to the Extended Deep Plane Rhytidectomy, an Anatomical Basis for Improved Outcomes. An informal title for this paper could be the Preservation Facelift article. So first, we're going to hear a little bit about how this paper came about.
Yeah, I'm Mike Nayak. I'm a facial plastic surgeon based in St. Louis, Missouri. I've been fortunate to have benefited from a lot of my mentors' time and attention and teaching, and I owe them a lot, so I can never really repay them. So I've always kind of lived by, they're not interested in being repaid, you can't repay them anyway, but what you can do is kind of honor that and pay it forward. At any given day, I have 3 surgeons watching me in my operating room, and they'd start asking questions, like they'd send me a text with a question back and forth, and, I'm kind of attending to one. And then through the magic of social media, there's another 7 questions in my inbox from surgeons I've never met, what about this, about that? And so finally I just set up a Telegram group where I could just put them all in one place. And I'd say, happy to answer your questions, and I want to share everything I know, but it'd be wonderful if more than one person was hearing it. And if you were getting answers from more than one person, because then I'd learn something about this topic too. So I set up a little Telegram group where we're closing in on 3,000 members now. And it has been one of the most educational things for me, because it's like a fellowship that goes on forever. Over time, we all kind of face the same challenges. And one of the challenges that I had is the loose, empty neck with bad skin on the vertical segment of the neck. And that has always been a real challenge, and the conventional wisdom has been, you need to undermine that skin all the way down past the last wrinkle, and I used to teach that. And I started having better success with Mario Pelli-Sarablo's lateral skin displacement platysmoplasty, where you leave a lot of that skin attached to the platysma and redrape it by using the platysma as a handle rather than completely undermine it and lose control of the skin. And so I was doing a lot of lateral skin displacement platysmoplasties, and that started feeling pretty good. Ben Talei, good friend of mine, and I think one of the absolute best facelift surgeons ever, delaminates very little of the vertical segment of the neck. But then on this Telegram group on June 26th, 2023,
quote, I thought I was going crazy, but my left neck results were superior than my right, sometimes substantially so. I also undermine the skin minimally in the neck a la Ben, but I would delaminate the 1 to 2 centimeters above the border of the mandible just before inset. It occurred to me that I did this more often on my first side, the right, and sometimes would forget by the time I got to the left and was finishing up. Turns out, I think this was the difference. Having the skin just inferior to the gonial angle maintain attachment to the platysma allows me to create a deeper crevasse on this side.
Offhanded comment he made in the Telegram group, that was June 26, 2023. And I said, that's genius, because now all of a sudden you're controlling the submental skin from fibrostromal attachments to the platysma that are 4 or 5 centimeters away, not 13 or 14 centimeters away, if you completely undermine everything back to the occipital hairline. And so I started doing that. I said, to me, this feels very much like the scroll ligaments being preserved, creating the shadow in the lateral alar region with the preservation rhinoplasty. And I think you were there, Peter. At this point, I started really going hard on leaving all the vertical neck skin attached. I started really going hard on leaving as much of the infragonial skin attached to the platysma as possible, and I started calling it Roskies patch based on, credit where credit is due. He had this observation, and it's a good one. Ben, back to him, and Neil Gordon also does this limited delamination of the fixed SMAS, the pre-parotid SMAS. So I started incorporating that and kind of pushing that. I used to do my high SMAS facelifts when I was doing them. I would do the layer 4 dissection first and then delaminate the high SMAS flap off of it because it was easier and faster. So I kind of went back to that. I started leaving all the SMAS on the skin and then not delaminating it. And again, Neil Gordon had already been drifting that direction, unaware I didn't know about that till after we submitted this paper for publication, but great minds think alike, right? And so it's a combination. All right, Ben's vertical neck not dissected, Mario Pelle's LSD concept, Roskies happening to mention this offhanded comment in our chat group, how it improved his results. And all these things together kind of reminded me very much of ligament preservation rhinoplasty. And so at that meeting, you were there, was the first time I put the phrase together, preservation facelift. And we presented it in that meeting with Boris Checker in Istanbul. But I can't say I came up with any of it, right? It's pieces that various people have independently either come up with or evolved the same direction, and those are the authors on the paper.
Here's Dr. Mike Roskies, the first author of this paper and a facial plastic surgeon in Toronto specializing in facial rejuvenation and rhinoplasty.
I always found it pretty interesting how we focused so much as deep plane surgeons on composite flaps when it came to the face. And then in conferences, we would do the exact opposite when we presented our technique for the neck. We would maximally delaminate the neck all the way down to the collarbones, address the muscle underneath it, and then reposition the skin as if we had done nothing. And we talked about the advantages of composite flaps in the face and ignored the fact that we were creating this potential dead space in the neck. And so I kind of stumbled upon the composite philosophy or approach to the neck by accident. As you know, and many people listening know, we're part of an online group of many surgeons who discuss ideas and collaborate. I would say all in the name of helping our patients. And so one day I made a note of a mistake that turned out to be an advantage in surgery, whereby I felt that on my second side, which is my left side, I was not paying as much attention to maximally delaminate the jawline, and felt that I was actually getting better lift on that side, not just in the OR, but long-term as well. Preservation facelift or limited delamination is more of a philosophy rather than a specific set of techniques or approaches, whereby we're trying to maximally elevate a composite flap and minimize delamination to prevent short-term and long-term complications with regards to hematoma, seroma, fluid accumulations, but also improve the biomechanics of our lift so that our long-term outcomes are improved as well. The deeper we kind of dove into the literature, the more we realized that limited delamination had been attempted by many surgeons in the past with varying degrees of success. I think our technique is most similar to that of Owsley, who basically entered the muscle almost after he made his skin incision. The biggest difference was that he didn't connect his face and his neck flap, and so it wasn't a true composite flap. He was worried about injuring the marginal mandibular branch. And of course, there are other surgeons like O'Daniel, Mendelsohn, many who predated us, Gordon, who's now on the paper, who really have attempted to minimize their delamination, not just for complication prevention, but also for improvement of biomechanics. And so in writing the paper, I was presented with the option to include a huge cohort of patients that included Neil Gordon's patients and Ben Talei patients, or talk about really just the technique as it currently stands. And we realized that the paper should really pay homage to all of those who have made these attempts before us, include a huge patient cohort, almost, I think, 4,000 patients, to really establish that the philosophy of minimal delamination is at the core of what we're trying to do. Its current iteration involves, I would say, 3 basic tenets. The first one is the sailboat modification introduced by Talei. The second one being the skin island, so preserving the fibrous septae kind of near the cervical retaining ligaments. And then the third one is minimizing total delamination in the neck, so no longer going down to the collarbone, but actually going down to the first crease of the neck.
I'm Dr. Ben Talei. I'm a facial plastic surgeon specializing in aging face out here in Beverly Hills, California. So Neil Gordon and I, for the facial portion, had independently come to the same conclusion. And we'd been doing it the same time. He actually published it a few years ago when I was doing it as well. I just never got to read the paper, unfortunately. But he's an amazing surgeon, so it's not a coincidence, I guess, that we came to the same conclusion. But then Mike Nayak and I lecture together so much that we would just listen to each other's lectures, and we saw that, hey, we're kind of talking about the same thing here in different ways. And so we started to converge ideas and push more and more towards less dissection. And the other friends that we lecture with a lot, being Roskies and Dominic, Bray, and Alessandro, Gualdi, and everybody, we all kind of pick up on this, and slowly most of our friends have converted to the facial portion, which I had informally called the sailboat modification on the deep plane entry point, and the neck we had done differently. I had started to dissect less and do less skin delamination years ago, but I would still connect all the way across the neck from lateral to central neck. I just wouldn't go as far down anymore. I was getting massive improvements in skin quality and better overall healing. And then Mike Nayak decided to actually leave an area undissected in between the submental and the lateral, which I tried for a while, but I don't do much anymore. But he's still doing it on select cases. The way I explain it to people is if you look at the layers of the face and you look at the outer layers versus the inner layers, you've got your mimetic muscles, which this is a very important layer called the SMAS that we all know about. The SMAS overall, when you look at the face, from the front of the face, is the muscular portion of the SMAS. When you look at the lateral face, it's the fascial portion of the SMAS. And this is it's the above middle layer of the face. And below it is what we call the glide plane. So these muscles, in order to move or to be able to move, they can't have any fixation on the bottom. So they have to be able to glide freely. But in order to show mimetics, which is very different than all the other muscles in our body, they have to be attached directly to the skin. So the mimetic muscle glides underneath, and on top it's connected through a layer called the subdermal fascia, which I call the SMAF, the supramusculoponderonic fascia, or the subdermal fascia, which is a fatty fascial layer that exists mainly over the muscles, not as much over the fascia. So when we're looking at the SMAS, the muscular portion has more fatty component on it, the fascial component has less. So that's an important differentiation, because it's important when you understand how the mimetics display themselves. And then this connects directly to the skin. And so that's how mimetics work, is that the muscles are connected directly to the skin with an intervening layer called the subdermal fascia, which is thicker in some places and thinner in some places. And this is one unit, and it ages as one unit. It should lift as one unit. It should be treated as one unit. In all senses, it is one unit and should be maintained as one unit for healing purposes, for aging purposes, and for traumatic dissection purposes. So the less you traumatically separate in the face, the better off you are. Now, when we're doing deep plane lifting, some of our lifting is submuscular, that's in the glide plane. Some of it is supramuscular, and you're unfortunately in the mid face, and for a lip lift, you're getting a little traumatic, but at least you're keeping the subdermal fascial layer attached to the skin. So what we try to do here is lift as much as possible, release as much as possible, but keep the skin and the deeper layers intact as much as possible, because those top three layers are supposed to be one. So you want to traumatize that as little as possible, keep them connected, keep them healthy. And that's the idea. Now for the face, in order to get skin quality improvements, you need to lift and you need to volumize to pull yourself out three-dimensionally. For the neck, you're creating depth and contour, which increases surface area of travel three-dimensionally. And that's what gives you the skin quality improvement, because the same amount of skin has to drape across a larger area. And you can do all this without yanking on the skin. So that's why we're delaminating less in the neck, because it's just not necessary. It's more important to create contours and depth, and that's what gives you the skin quality improvement.
Bear in mind, these are literally the experts of facelift surgery across the entire world, combining their patients together. So naturally, we're going to see lower complication rates and better outcomes. That's for certain. But I think for me, the most important part of the paper is really describing the anatomical basis for why it should work and why we should see less complications. And when we preserve the fibrous septae from the muscle to the skin, so if you can recall, every image we think about with regards to deep plane surgery has that tree with a very strong ligamentous trunk, and that's what we're severing as we're releasing ligaments in the deep plane. But let's not forget that there are tons of branches that pass through the SMAS and go into the skin. And that's really what we're trying to preserve when we talk about preservation facelift surgery. In the past, we would have created a bilamellar flap, we would have chopped the branches, and we would have chopped the trunk at the same time. But to preserve those branches, knowing full well that those ligaments were just deep to that area, we think that we can create a little bit more of an effective and reliable lift as a result of that.
Another way you could think about it is a natural evolution of the concept of fully subcutaneously undermining the face all the way to the nasolabial fold and pulling the skin back is an inferior result on the anterior face to entering the deep plane, carrying the skin of the anterior face on the deep plane itself. You get more power and more predictable results in the anterior face. This is just carrying that concept further down into the neck and making the connection between the deep plane handle and then the skin target, whether it's the nasolabial fold and jowl or the submental skin and vertical excess wrinkly skin on the prelaryngeal part of the neck, better bound to what you are actually lifting. So similarly, if you did a deep plane facelift and then you go ahead and delaminate, take all the attachments from the deep plane to the skin, the platysmic cutaneous ligaments, that kind of thing, then you lose the power of the deep plane lift. This is a kind of that same thought process and just taking it one step further. What if we were able to leave even more of these vertical fibrous attachments that, within the personal communication with Neil Gordon? What if we left even more of those things so that we have even stronger power for the same degree of lift, same degree of layer 4 undermining, same degree of risk to the patient, better control on the skin? And, it's hard to get our brains away from the concept of we see the problem on the skin. That's where we see all the issues, but that's not where it should be treated. We got away from that concept in the middle third of the face and in the jawline. I don't know why it's so hard for us to adopt the concept below the jawline, but it still applies below the jawline.
People are fooled by what they see. As you age, you lose the depth and contour of the neck and it becomes more blunt and linear. So it's more of a straight line rather than a right angle. And shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So when you look at the aging neck, you see a lot of excess skin because it is now in the formation of a straight line rather than a right angle. People mistake that for thinking that your body grew an extra meter of skin as you aged, which is almost impossible. And they don't fully understand, how the aging happened. They just think excess skin formed, when realistically it's not what happened. Your neck got blunted 3-dimensionally, and this blunting is what causes the skin to look excessive because now it's pushed outwards instead of going into this deep concavity in the submandibular region. So I have zero focus on the skin. I have full focus on recontouring, repositioning, or recompartmentalization of deeper structures. And then I know as a fact, that the skin quality is going to look tremendously better.
There's dogma in the aesthetic world. We talk about key opinion leaders and thought leaders, and truth of the matter is, it doesn't really matter what you say. Your results matter more than anything else. And I think that the authors on this paper put the results behind what they say. And, it's an honor to be associated with him and to have collaborated with him. And I look forward to next year you hosting this podcast and somebody coming up with a better technique that's proven us wrong, because that is all in the name of improving outcomes for all of our patients.
Deep plane facelifting is more logical way to lift a face, but the term deep plane has been kind of bastardized. So it means a million different things. So the first thing I tell people is you're on the right track if you're trying to go in that direction, but don't think for a second that the word deep plane is some kind of encyclopedia term. It means a different thing depending on who you ask, and it's all over the place. And if you want to get into really extensive or advanced, deep plane type of lifting, then fortunately now you have lots of videos you can watch. So you can watch Quality Medical Publishing. There's a ton of videos, whether it's me or Jacono or Nayak, or there's a ton of people who have videos. You just watch them over and over and over again to try to understand the anatomy, and then go visit those people. That's the best way to do it. I have another video library coming out called Cubic Compendium, where I'm going to be doing injectables as well, and surgery. So you get to see kind of from both sides, facial volume, facial access points, and what it translates to, doing filler, what it translates to surgically, and then surgery, what it translates to for injectables. But that's really the way to do it: is watch a ton of videos, memorize the anatomy, keep staring at the anatomy, and then go visit the people doing the video before you do anything.
If I had one word of advice, it is what we are taught by people, I guess like me now, that sound like they know what they're talking about, isn't necessarily what's going to be the truth in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. And you should, at any stage in your career, be ready to give up everything you thought was right if you see something is better. And that, again, that happened to my rhinoplasty mentor, happened to me in rhinoplasty, and it's happened to me in facelift, and it'll probably happen to me again, I'm hoping. Like, that's the exciting part. We don't have to buy a new device. We don't have to have a new filler invented for us to become brand new surgeons the next day. You learn a new fact and you're better the next day. And so I think that's the best part about being a surgeon, and you don't want to lose sight of that.
We'd like to thank the authors for their commentary, and thank you for listening to our podcast. If you'd like to explore more, please feel free to check out the article in print at the Facial Plastic Surgery and Aesthetic Medicine Journal or online. We'll catch you on the next one.